Well, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to lesson 17, The Journey of the Soul. So I'm just going to say just something that as we continue this journey through the way of mastery, these next chapters coming up are just going to be so rich. At least they were for me when I originally went through them. And so, I always say, get your seatbelts on and get ready because we're ready to go on a ride. And so, right out of the gate, Jesuit says, and all that you do is not the result of that which comes to you, but rather that which comes from you. So again, it's this idea that things are coming from within us, and it's not, we're not the victim. And he's really going to talk about that a lot later in the chapter, but this idea that it's coming from us. And so it's just, once again, in the third paragraph, you are consciousness, you are awareness, you are that which witnesses, that which experiences, that which pays homage to the one thing that God has created, Christ, which means the anointed. You have been anointed since before the beginning of all worlds with that which the Father is awareness and pure intelligence. So you're anointed with that awareness and pure intelligence. You have been anointed with the ability to choose what you wish to perceive. So again, this is your choice, and thereby imbued with the power to create and abide freely in each moment, if that is what you choose. In the following paragraph, it says, at any moment, you are perfectly free to see the radiant beauty of the real world, pervading all things, even your own consciousness, just as you also are free to see fear. All right. So then further on in that section, several paragraphs down, the paragraph that starts off with, then there was a moment for each and every one of you when the decision was made within your consciousness, within your mind, that conditions were appropriate for you again to incarnate. So in other words, what Joshua is saying is that we made a decision to come down here. Like we had unfinished business, right? There are many factors that attract the soul yet again to contents into physical form, but the chief among these is a perception and thought that there is yet something left undone. So in other words, we felt like we still had work to do. There is yet some lesson that cannot be realized save within the physical domain. There is indeed a purpose that you as a soul has yet wished to fulfill. So in other words, you want to come back down here to finish something. In the following paragraphs, the last sentence, it kind of defines it, says that you must do something to correct what is occurring, right? So that can be a primary driver for so many. In the following paragraph, it says there is a compulsion, this need to get involved to fix. I love that. I just spoke true to my heart because, I don't know if I want to fix, but I definitely want to help, right? All right. That's kind of the way it works for me. Further on down in the paragraph that starts, a decision is made in the mind, not forced upon you whatsoever. In fact, we will share with you that the decision to incarnate need not have ever been made. Does this mean that you made a mistake? No, not at all. And I love this. There can be no mistakes in all of creation. You could just sit on that one thought and let it be with you for days and weeks to try to process that. Again, there can be no mistakes in all of creation. And then we start the sections in the chapter where it really starts talking about the process. And first of all, it starts talking about coming into the body. Shall we say you turn your thermostat down? And then it starts talking about your soul as individual consciousness began to descend into incarnation. This cannot occur before the moment of conception in your mother's womb. So it starts talking about this process and it starts to go through it. Further on down in the paragraph that starts off as what is that physical form made of? And then it says, therefore, as you come into this world, the very first relationship that you have is with the mother and father, and you know and feel them intimately. Intimately. And then the next paragraph where it starts off here is also where your struggle begins. And Jesuit says, this quantum leap, the shifting of attention was so dramatic and required such a shock that you began to forget your connection to spirit. You began to forget your realization that you are soul, pure consciousness. You began to lose awareness of your freedom. You could call it becoming unconscious or falling asleep. Oh, yeah. And that's what happens is we come down here. We're so connected. We know what's going on. We know why we're here. We know who we are. And then all of a sudden, coming into this third dimensional reality, we start to forget. And that's what happens. And then the next section, imprinting of the womb, I only highlighted a few things. It talks about this in the second paragraph, but more important than all of this is the quality of the emotional energy that makes up the particular matrix the mother is experiencing in her own universe. Goes on to say, therefore, you begin to feel and experience the psychic field of the mother. You are also aware of the psychic field of the father and of any other immediate family members. So we are heavily influenced by those. You're also aware of the energies of any particular dominant energies that are going on within the social structure. So there's also all these things are impacting you, your mother, your father, the environment that you grow up with, your extended family, the church if you went to church, school if you went to school, government if you went to government, the color of your skin, your sexual orientation or preferences. All of those things are impacting you, right? Then finally, the one paragraph starts to talk about when you do this, the body of the fetus goes numb. That is, life force is withdrawn from it. As it grows, the nervous system adapts to the level of life force that is flowing through it. And that is what comes from you and not from another. And then the next section is where we start to turn things around. And it talks about the journey of awakening begins. And what's great is that I love it because Jesuit talks about your different ages. And when you're very, very young, well, I'm just going to start off the first paragraph. You're lucky by the time you're about 20 or 21 years of age, you're ready to start finding out who you are. And for me personally, I can just tell you that it happened way, way, way early. Like I knew there was a connection when I was a small child. I consider when I walked into unity is when I had my true spiritual awakening in terms of I knew who I was. And I knew I was connected to something and I just knew. And that doesn't mean that life didn't go on and I didn't have problems, but I've had this knowing, this awareness for a long time. And it's been a huge, huge part of my life in terms of following that and letting it guide me and direct me, right? So if you're 21 or 20, you're ready to start finding out who you are. The paragraph that starts, you think that you are yourself, but you are really a bundle of reactivity, a bundle of reactivity. In other words, not conscious. You're on the treadmill. You're just going hamster on a treadmill. Right? That is, you're already caught up in the perception of what your experience is coming to you from the outside. And therefore, you must seek to adapt yourself to it. Then it starts in the next paragraphs. It talks about what happens in your 20s and then what happens in your 30s and then what happens in your 40s until finally you get to the point where finally you ask the question, the fundamental gnawing question, what is my purpose? Why have I really come to this planet? I am more than just this. I am pure soul. I am pure spirit. I know there is more than this. And then all of a sudden, the journey begins, right? And then I highlighted a few paragraphs down. So a further step to forgetting who you are occurs when you begin to sense yourself as identified with the particular perceptions, the particular belief structures that you're floating around in a higher mind of the body itself. You have forgotten the soul. I cannot tell you the idea of your perception of who and what you are, who and what God is, who and what the universe is, who and what the world is. We all have perceptions, right? And it doesn't matter if they're right or wrong or anything. We all have them. And that's what it's starting to, plunk, 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 drop some seeds, because perceptions are a huge, huge part of this, and becoming aware of the perceptions, which we'll talk about in a minute. The paragraph that starts off, and you have created an identification with one small aspect of life. And then it talks about the idea of a global citizen. And then the paragraph starts off with, so you begin to sense this process whereby you keep making yourself smaller and smaller and smaller, taking on psychic patterns from the parents, from the peers, from the society around you. In other words, they're not yours. I keep saying this over and over and over again. They are not your perceptions. They were put on you by somebody's else. And then it goes on to say, the spiritual path begins when for some reason something begins to whisper to you. You'll hear me in church talk about the tap on the shoulder. This is not who you are. This is not why you've come. You've come to heal your sense of separation from God. You have come to realize the truth. God. Those words, even now as I say them, just melt my soul because I know it's true. I absolutely know that's why I'm here, and I've known that for a long, long time. The paragraph, you think you're thinking your own thoughts when what is often the case is you are merely parroting all that has come into your computer bank, into the brain and into the body. Further down, until you decide to change the momentum of the ripples you are creating in the depth of your mind, you cannot begin to ascend from the third dimension. The desire to do so is always within you. That is, it may be dormant, but the desire to know God must necessarily be within each soul, since God is your reality. Oh man, what a statement. God is your reality. You have fallen asleep at some point. There comes an urge to awaken. When it comes, it is unmistakable. The fireworks may not occur, but a shift happens within your being, and you know that you can never return to the way that it was. You can never pretend that life is only what you see through your senses. In the next section, and this is where this thing starts to get cooking, right? Your soul begins to speak. It begins to whisper in the depth of your being. I love that sentence. A new question further down the paragraph, and a new question is emerging. In your mind, who am I? There may be many forms, but the question remains one. Who am I? What am I? From where have I come? What is life? What is God? How can there be anything at all? In a paragraph down, he calls it the first stirring. I love that. The first stirring. Hey, what's going on? And all of a sudden, and it's your soul that's starting to speak. That's why I love this section, right? In the next section, there talks about the dismantling of the blocks to spirit. For you see, awakening requires a dismantling of the structures of consciousness by which you have been ordering your perceptions of the third dimension. I've talked about the great unlearning. Jesuits calling it the dismantling. I love that. I love that. And he goes on to talk about the patterns that brought you forth with your soul are like a magnet. That is, they attract energy states in the physical dimensions experience that are resonant with those patterns. We are energy, and we attract whatever energy we're giving off, right? In a paragraph, a few paragraphs down, awakening does require vigilance. Awakening requires that rather than merely going with the reactions, you begin to question, you begin to observe, you begin to feel, you begin to think more deeply. Do your work. Isn't that what I always say? In the next paragraph, the very last sentence, you are beginning to become a self-observer rather than a world observant. Now, for all of you that would like to quicken and hasten the process, the answer is very simple. Spend more time becoming self-observant, less time being concerned with what's going on in the world, no time blaming the world for your state of being. No parents, not society, not God, but owning. Owning. The section, assuming complete responsibility and power. I love this. Here's an important word I want to share with you. You've heard it many times before, but when you truly reach a point of assuming 100% responsibility for what you think, what you feel, what you see, what you experience, this creates a quantum leap in the other direction. It creates a quantum leap towards self-observation, towards freedom that you're seeking, toward the healing of the soul, toward the realization of your purpose, toward awakening. In the next sentence, in the next paragraph, the final sentence, in other words, you must assume power. That's how it changes. That's how this whole thing shifts. I'm just going to read some of the quotes. If you don't bring forth what is within you, what is within you will destroy you. If you bring forth that with what is within you, what is within you will save you. Carl Jung, the famous psychology, said, oh, what's the great quote? I'm gonna screw it up, but something like, we call it fate and it will control us. So in other words, if you don't look at your own beliefs, the limitations that have been placed upon you, until you start to do that work, you're going to call it fate and it will control you. There's just some great quotes. I will enter in this transition called death. So he's talking about facing death head on. In a paragraph further down, is it possible to change your vibrational frequency of the body? I'm going to say something rather unique. Not only is it possible to change the vibrational frequency of your consciousness out of which the body has emerged. So in other words, you can change it. You can do something about it. The next section is called turning inward. And to me, this is where it really, I think, is one of the most powerful chapters in the entire book. It talks about changing the momentum of consciousness, not outward, but inward. So we're going in. The next paragraph, you begin to allow the changes to occur in the choices that you're making. You begin to change your environment. You start to change things. And then all of a sudden, in the next paragraph, and this is where, to me, as the work that I do, especially in my coaching, it talks about you discover what patterns have been running you. So now we're starting to become consciously aware of what patterns. We all have patterns about everything, from the relationship we have to ourselves, to the relationship we have with God, to the relationship we have with money, to the relationship we have with health, to the relationship we have with eating, to the relationship we have with all these things. And it's just incredible, but they're all patterns. And then the paragraph, and I highlighted this entire paragraph, eventually the soul that is truly committed to awakening does not flee uncomfortable situations until it believes it has fully extracted all the wisdom that it can. So instead of ignoring, instead of yelling at it, instead of judging it and judging yourself and judging people and judging situations and moments that happen, which is basically resisting and not dealing with it, we slow down and we spend time with the moment and see what it has to teach us, and we don't run from it. There's a way of knowing when that occurs that we'll get to later. In short, when there is just a quiet sense of peace, you can look upon the players and the experience you've just had with perfect equanimity to see them as perfectly innocent, right? And then it says, if there is reactivity in the mind, and in my opinion, that's resistance, there's judgment, there's yelling, screaming, hollering, no, this shouldn't be, that's called resistance. So it says, if there's reactivity in the mind because of anything that emerges in your relationship with your brothers or sisters, rest assured, the lesson's not complete. So in other words, there's more stuff in there for you to learn, right? Remember always that all events are neutral. And then I love when it talks about the dark night of the soul. We've heard that used over and over and over again. And I love this. It's really the dark night of the soul. It's actually the dark night of the ego and the healing of the soul. Oh, I love this. I love it. I love it. I love it. And then it starts talking about all the patterns you feel weighed down by the fears that are yet within the mind will remain with you for all of eternity. So they're not going anywhere until you decide to heal them. And that's got to be your decision. That has to come from you. I am going to heal these. And when that happens, look out. The next paragraph, there's an acceleration of healing process only when you completely release any valuations on victimhood, right? So let go of victimhood. Now, this is simply thought to hear that, and one can nod their head. It is another thing to look honestly upon your reactions in life to make sure you are not at any time perceiving yourself as a victim. Victim, victim, victim. The practice of extending love can often teach you that is so. When you take a situation that pushes your buttons, you decide to not flee. You decide, but stay. This teaches you the truth of your reality. Again, when are you reacting? When is there judgment? When is there fear? When is there attack? When is there you know, that kind of stuff? When is that stuff going on? And then it goes on to say that is why the practice of forgiveness is so extraordinarily valuable. In fact, you could say that ultimately the practice of forgiveness is the whole of spirituality. That's why Jesus talked about it so much. Why? Because the forgiveness means to let the world off the hook, to step out of any sense of victim consciousness. Ultimately, forgiveness is the forgiveness of oneself, forever allowing the delusion to settle into one's own mind, whereby one perceives oneself as separate from God, separate from brothers, sisters capable of being victimized. And so then Jesuit just asks a simple question: where am I perceiving myself as a victim of the world I see? Simple question, but oh, powerful. A few paragraphs down, it starts off with, beloved friends, look well into the way of transformation, for you must discover any corner of the mind that is yet holding out the view that life is something which happens to you and that there is something you are helpless to change. The position of being a victim is a position of loss of power, and Christ is not about the loss of power. Oh, you could just sit that one with that one for days and days and days and day. And then it says, a paragraph down, but that requires you let the world off the hook, that no one and no thing is any longer responsible for your joy, your happiness, or your peace. Nobody is. And then a few paragraphs down, turn back then towards your creations. If there's anything uncomfortable about your past, turn back to it, examine it, feel it. Look at the patterns that made it come up. Look at the choices you've made that perhaps now you are embarrassed about, but look upon them with judgment. Look at them with curiosity. Learn to look with wonder and innocence of a child. The further down one paragraph, I highlighted it. Self-awareness is everything. It's everything, for it is the self that you must long to realize. Powerful chapter. Spend time in here. Start looking, finding those patterns, finding those times when you're putting yourself into victimhood. I really, really hope this has been helpful. I'm sorry about the screen freezing up. It happens occasionally. But I really hope you enjoy this. Next week is going to be lesson 18. The highest work is embracing and forgiving your past. And with that, I send my love, my blessings to you. I hope you have a fantastic day. Blessings to you and all that you see. Take care.